Modern Islam is full of contrasts, conflicts, and contradictions. Some of the faithful seem stuck in the 15th century or even earlier, while others are racing into the 21st. One of the sharpest takes on modern Islam that I've read in a long time is a new book by Turkey's finest political analyst, Mustafa Akyol. It is called Islam Without Extremes, a Muslim Case for Liberty. It's a past GPS Book of the Week. Akyol joined me recently to discuss the future of Islam. Mustafa Akyol, pleasure to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be on the show, Ferry. Thank you.
Why do you think Islam has such a kind of brutal image? You know, even well-meaning people, even tolerant people, basically believe that at the end of the day, there's something in the religion that seems to breed fanaticism or intolerance or violence. And that if you look at, an event around the world, or if it's a terrorist event or something like that, there is a tendency to assume there must be those Muslims out there somewhere, Nigeria, Indonesia. Why do you think that is?
Well, that is because, honestly, there are fanatic, intolerant Muslims who, of course, have been making the news because they're doing or saying horrible things. But my argument as a fellow Muslim is that, well, Christianity had such expressions in the past. There was a time Catholicism was not very liberal, the Middle Ages, the Inquisition. But it has changed. But Islam can change as well.
Now, you grew up in Turkey, which is a secular country. You grew up as a believing Muslim, but liberal. What was your experience of growing up with regard to this issue? Did you watch extremism grow?
While I was growing up, I saw signs of authoritarianism in the name of Islam, which disturbed me, but on the other hand, I loved Islam as a faith. In my book, actually, I explain how I found a book in my grandfather's library at the age of 9, which had beautiful quotes from the Quran. Then a quote, not from the Quran, but a medieval Islamic text, which said, if your children do not start to pray at the age of 10, then beat them up. Well, at the age of 9, when I read that, I got a little worried. And I had a question in my mind. I said, would it be a good thing if I prayed because I wanted to avoid a slap in my face? Right. Would it be much better?
Right. If the only reason you're playing is to avoid getting slapped.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be much better if I prayed genuinely to worship God. And I think that's a question that is very relevant for some Muslim societies today.
But you found that a lot of the things that people think of as part of Islam are actually not in the Quran.
Not in the Quran. I mean, there's no stoning in the Quran. The idea that you should execute someone for apostatizing from Islam does not exist in the Quran. The idea that women are not smart enough and to advise men, that's not in the Quran. A lot of troubling issues that we find in the Muslim world today are actually do not come from the core of the religion, which is the scripture. They come from historical interpretations, and they sometimes reflect just medieval Middle Eastern culture rather than the religion itself, which makes it easier to make a case for reform of these.
If you look at the issue that most people think of as a central part of Islam, women in black veils, head to toe, the line in the Quran, as I understand it, simply says women should dress modestly, comma, exactly, as should men.
Exactly.
From that has been interpreted.
Exactly. I mean, when you look at the Quran, there's, yes, women should dress modestly, and some medieval scholars describe this modesty in the 10th century that nothing should be visible other than their eyes. And when we freeze Islam in these medieval norms, we are actually creating this big gap between the modern world and evolving modern world and some traditions. And I think that also harms Islam because it makes people to choose between their faith and a more open, liberal attitude.
You noticed something very interesting when you went to Mecca. You did the Hajj, actually, what's called the Umrah, or the off-season Hajj.
Yeah.
And you noticed something about the difference between being in the heart of Mecca, following the rules that have been in place since the 7th century, and Saudi Arabia today.
Very interesting. Indeed, when I went to the Kaaba, I did my prayers and the rituals. What I noticed was that around the Kaaba, there is no segregation. Men and women are together. There is no physical barrier between a man and a woman in the very holy shrine of Islam.
And the Kaaba is the holiest shrine
in the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam. But the interesting thing is that when you leave the Kaaba and you go to Burger King or Starbucks, which is next to the shrine, you have to be separated. Men and women go two different ways because the Saudi kingdom physically separates men and women in every public space, thinking that that's the pious thing to do. But if there was... Except in Kaaba. So I said, like, if you want to talk to a lady in Saudi Arabia freely, that's the only ways you can. The only way you can do this, only place you can do this, is the Kaaba.
What do you say to people who say, fine, Christianity was intolerant 500 years ago? Right now, what we're dealing with is that Islam is going through a very intolerant phase, and it is therefore the problem.
Well, I would agree with that, unfortunately. Not but all Islam, but we have Islamic groups, movements that are really intolerant and sometimes even violent. My argument, I mean, I'm not someone who says there's no problem in the Muslim world. I accept that there are big problems, especially from a liberal point of view. But I think that they can be changed and reformed, as Catholicism has changed immensely over the centuries, as other religions have changed.
And how do you do that reform? Is there something that the West can do, that America can do, or is this essentially an internal debate within Islam?
This is essentially an internal debate within Islam, but in my book I argue that the West can help indirectly, first by supporting principles of democracy and not supporting militant or autocratic regimes in the Middle East, like it happened for a long time. Secondly, support the market economy, because one thing that transforms minds is the economy. In Turkey, for example, one of the reasons that Turkey is a successful country, democracy, with some flaws, that we're discussing these days, is that Turkey has a market economy which raised the middle class, which made people more rational, more pragmatic about their attitude to the world, and also in religious matters as well. In the Arab world, you sometimes have oil money, which really is a curse, as you also wonderfully explained in your book. So we need to have education, and West can help in that regard. We need to have cultural exchanges. These are all very helpful, but violent confrontations do not help. Like occupying a country to liberate it, it doesn't really help that much.
Mustafa, pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure to be on the show. Thank you very much.